Okay, so what I'd like to share are some projects that have been sitting on the shelf for even a few years now in what I refer to as the laboratory. These are FileMaker development tools that I was writing, and since I haven't had a chance to move them forward for quite some time, uh, it occurred to me that more good would come of it if I just shared the ideas that I was working with the community, even if I don't have a final finished form to share, so that other people can see them and possibly be inspired by them to write their own tools that are similar or even better. And yeah, that's basically it. I wanted to share them so that people can see the ideas and maybe get their own ideas for tools that they could write. So these are basically a suite of tools that I was writing that would operate within a web browser. In particular, I was using Safari on Mac OS because that particular browser has the capability of understanding the clipboard or pasteboard format that FileMaker uses when you copy a FileMaker element and its XML representation to the clipboard. Safari is able to understand that. As far as I know, it's the only browser on Mac OS that does, and I don't believe that the Windows version of Safari understands that format, but I'd be delighted to find out if I happen to be mistaken about that. So for starters, I've got some custom functions here, and I'm going to copy one of them to the clipboard. I'm going to go over to a simple web page, and that's the basic idea of all of these tools, is that they'd be simple web pages, each of which would provide a very simple utility that you would use that would be useful during FileMaker development. They're all client-side based. No data has to be posted back to a server. It's all done with JavaScript within the browser locally. Um, so this first one is just about being able to view the clipboard XML. I can go in here into this field and paste the custom function that I just copied, and it'll show me the XML that's on the clipboard. And you can see it is in fact XML. And you could modify this and then copy it back. It does work. I don't happen to use that much. I generally use it for read-only purposes. I'm not really comfortable writing back the XML and encoded data that this generates. I think it would need a lot more QA before I would be comfortable doing that. So that's the first example of like a snippet, and it's also just sort of an example of how you can paste stuff into Safari from FileMaker, and it'll be able to read it and parse it. So let's move on to another tool here. It's a calculation parser. So I'm going to copy the text of a calculation in FileMaker to the clipboard. And in this case, I'll paste it into a field. And what this tool does is it will tokenize the calculation for us. So if I press this button here, down here we get a JSON representation of that calculation text, fully tokenized. You can see it's showing you which values are white space, FileMaker functions, separator characters, operators, basically everything. You can come back here and it's got a few different options to exclude white space if you wanted to, or just show me the comments, show me the calculation without the comments. The most useful option that I'm showing here is the one called just variables. That shows the local and global variables that are referenced in a calculation. Not let variables. We could have something like that as well. It's got the capability of, those are parsed out equally well. But in this particular tool, I've just got something that will show you global and local variables, the kind that are preceded with a $sign. Now, there were none in this particular calculation, but let's go ahead and add some in just to illustrate. So I'll go down here and I'll add in a global variable. We'll set it to something. I'll add in a local variable. We'll set that to something. And I'll add in another statement that references a variable. All right, so we've added 3 variables here. And let's go ahead and see what happens when we parse those out. Okay, so we've got a JSON array of 3 objects, each object representing these variables that we, or one of these variables that we added in. And you can see they're indicated what type of variable they are, global or local. And then this last property, variable, is set by calculation. That shows that this is context aware. So it understands that this first global variable is being assigned a value in this calculation. And so this property, which is called variable, is set by calculation. that is set to true. Similarly, for the local variable, we are assigning a value to it, and so the property is set to true. However, in this third example, we can see that that variable is not being updated, it's just being referenced. And so for that one, the property is set to false, showing that the variable is not being updated. So it's context aware, this parser is. Possible use cases for this, I could see maybe writing a utility where you come in and you paste in a calculation that's all jumbled up in a big mess. And since it knows what everything is and it knows the sort of nesting of the various statements, it could hopefully return a nicely formatted version of the calculation, either for viewing or for pasting back into FileMaker, so that you can tidy up and understand somebody else's jumbled code or even your own. That's probably the one of the most likely use cases I could see for this parser. The other one is based on the fact that it's able to parse out variables intelligently like that. And I believe we'll use that in this next tool, which is called Script 411, which gives you like a quick synopsis of a script. So let's get out of here and go to a file that's got a Meteor script in it. This is just a file that modifies Excel headers on an XLSX document. We've got a script here called rename XLSX column headers. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard, and I'm going to come over to the script 411 page, paste it in, and it returns the parsed out information that I might care about. The script name, the input parameters that are expected. This tool was written prior to the release of version 16 of FileMaker, so at that time I made the tool to be aware of 6 fried rice input parameters, because that's what I was using to pass script parameters. I'd love to update this to parse out JSON parameters. That would take a bit more effort since we all have a variety of different ways we're doing that now. It would be a more involved parsing process, but it'd be interesting to try to do that. Okay, so it parses out input parameters that are being expected, variables that are being referenced, and variables that are being set, and down at the bottom, the output parameters that are being returned. So it's a quick way to look at, sort of information about a script. I showed this to a good developer friend of mine, and he suggested that it could be turned into a FileMaker script linter. I think he's totally spot on about that. I think that would be a fun project to turn this into something that could give you kind of like a real high-level version of what's going on in your script and possibly alert you to problems that you've got going on in the script. For instance, variables that are referenced but not declared, and so on and so forth. Okie doke. Moving on, and similar to this tool, there's a tool called the script header template. So again, I can come over here and copy a script and come to the page in the browser, paste in the script, and it will use the same sort of techniques that it did for the script 411 tool, and it'll parse out things like the input parameters and the output parameters, and it'll format it into something that I can make a script header out of, and I can type in more information for purpose, dependencies, context, comments. It'll plug them all in below. I can copy that to the clipboard, come back to my script, and add in my header. So this has proven to be very useful when I've done a lot of rapid development and I haven't been conscientious about documenting every script as I go along. There comes a point when I need to go through and document each of the scripts, and for this it's been great. I'll be able to go and copy my script in, paste it into that tool, create a header, come back and put a nicely formatted header that'll be uniform throughout my whole file. So that's been a real time saver for me. Okay, let's see. Moving on to the next tool. This next tool is something that I originally wrote outside of a web browser back in the time of about FileMaker 11, and at that time I was using command line commands triggered by AppleScript and FileMaker to render this tool. It's basically a script differ that's based off of whatever you've got on your clipboard. So you can come in and quickly take a look at the difference between a script that you currently are working on and maybe one that you've stored as a backup copy within that same file or some other file. Like I said, I originally did this in version 11 of FileMaker. Worked great. but I wanted to move it to the browser, and also this gave me a chance to experiment with learning a little bit about React, which I used to build this particular tool. Um, it's very useful for when you're doing development, and you want to sort of check what you've done just before you save the file away, or doing collaborative development with other developers and you want to see what changes they made to a script, something like that. So let's take a look at this in action, and I'll go to a simpler script here. I'm going to duplicate this script, and then in the copy I'll go ahead and add some things, maybe delete something. Um, let's change something. Okay, and let's add something else here. We'll add a pause script step, and we'll get rid of something down here. And let's see how it works out. I'm going to go to the first version of the script, copy it to the clipboard, go over to this tool, paste it in. Going to come back here, copy my second script to the clipboard, come back to the tool, paste it in. And what we get is we get a visual diff of the two scripts. You can see where I've added some stuff. You can see where something's been deleted and modified, and so on and so forth. So it's a nice way to be able to see the difference between two scripts that you can easily get onto your clipboard. Now, there's a lot of stuff that I'd love to do to improve this in terms of the UI. It would be great to be able to have maybe the ability to search for one, and sort of collapsible nesting would be really cool. And also I could see it being combined with some of the ideas that are being used in the script 411, where maybe it gives you a little bit of a rundown of what's going on in the script as well, what variables are being used and so forth. But for now, it's just doing the diffs, and that has proved to be really useful, like I mentioned, in collaborative development, and also just when I need to see the changes that I've made, maybe between a backup copy of something and something that I've just put out into production. So that's pretty much it. I think those are the only tools that I have right now that I wanted to show you. They're all in a very sort of underdeveloped state. My hope had been to develop them to a high level and then share them with the community, but since I don't seem to be working on them, I thought I'd at least get the ideas out there, show folks that you can use a web browser to do this kind of stuff, and maybe some of you will have at it and write some similar stuff. So thanks for taking a look. Bye-bye.